An elderly woman with neatly pinned silver hair stepped into the Jiu Jitsu academy, her crisp white jai pressed to perfection. "Wrong door, Grandma," Coach Jackson jeered, sparking laughter across the mats. But no one, not even him, was ready for what Edith Simmons was about to do. She moved with care, folding her kimono and tucking it gently into her worn gym bag. Every motion was slow but deliberate, graceful with purpose. At 72, Edith carried a quiet strength, a lifetime of discipline etched into the way she moved. Her fingers brushed the edge of her black belt, its frayed threads whispering stories from 4 relentless decades on the mat. Sunlight streamed through the windows of her modest new apartment. It had only been 3 weeks since she'd arrived in this quiet suburban town, starting fresh after the heartbreaking loss of her husband. The grief still sat with her, but so did determination. She wasn't ready to fade quietly into the background. After unpacking her essentials and placing her late husband's photo on the mantel, there was one thing left to reclaim: her place on the mat. "Your joints aren't getting any younger, Edie," she muttered, easing herself upright with a familiar wince. Her doctor had been clear: move or begin to decline. And Edith had never been one to back down from a challenge. She faced the mirror. Her face bore the maps of time, but her eyes remained sharp, focused. She nodded at her reflection, the same small affirmation she'd given herself before every session since 1980, the year she first stepped barefoot onto a dojo mat at 28. Not many knew the full story. She'd trained under the legendary Master Takahashi for 15 years before his passing, earning her black belt at a time when women in jiu-jitsu were nearly unheard of. While raising 2 children and supporting her husband's career as a school principal, she never stopped training. Quietly, without fanfare, she became a second-degree black belt. She never needed to prove anything. Her skill lived in her muscle memory, her instinct, and her calm. "First day at a new academy," she whispered, grabbing her keys. "Just like riding a bike." The drive to Elite Martial Arts Academy was short, 15 minutes at most. The facility looked modern and imposing, with tall glass windows and a sleek sign. The parking lot gleamed with polished SUVs and performance cars. Her modest old sedan looked almost shy parked beside them. She watched as fit, confident young men and women in designer gym wear filed inside. She glanced at her simple white GI, adjusted it, and stepped out of the car with steady resolve. Inside, a young receptionist with perfectly styled hair greeted her with a practiced smile that faltered slightly at the sight of Edith. "Can I help you?" she asked, uncertainty lacing her tone. "Yes," Edith replied, voice steady. "I'd like to join your jiu-jitsu program." The receptionist's brows lifted. "Our adult classes are pretty intense. We also offer senior yoga on Tuesdays. Perhaps that's more suitable?" Edith smiled gently. "I've been practicing jiu-jitsu for over 40 years, dear. I'm just looking for a place to train." A flicker of surprise crossed the woman's face, but she remained polite. "Well, we have open mats starting in 15 minutes. You're welcome to observe, then chat with our head coach." "That sounds perfect. You'll just need to sign these forms. Coach Jackson will evaluate your skills after the session." Edith signed without hesitation. She could feel the receptionist's curious eyes on her as she made her way to the locker room. It wasn't the first time people had wondered what someone like her was doing in a place like this, and she doubted it would be the last. The training floor was pristine, spacious, well lit, lined with the latest gear and fresh mats. Around 20 students were warming up, some wearing blue or white kimonos marked with colorful belts. Their movements were sharp, rhythmic, practiced. The air was filled with the slap of feet on mats and the focused sounds of breathwork. Edith observed quietly. The techniques were familiar, timeless basics she'd repeated thousands of times. She noticed the precision, the respect, the energy. This academy had promise. Then she saw him, Coach Adam Jackson, mid-30s, tall, broad-shouldered, radiating self-assurance. His blue GA was adorned with competition patches, and his black belt was tied in a way that demanded attention. He moved confidently through the class, offering critiques, demonstrating moves, accepting nods of respect. When his eyes landed on Edith, he froze for a second. Surprise gave way to a smirk. He leaned toward a nearby student, a muscular guy with a purple belt, and said something that made them both chuckle. Edith stepped onto the mat and bowed, as tradition dictated. Slowly the chatter faded. Students turned, watching the silver-haired woman in white. "Ma'am, can I help you?" Coach Jackson called out, half amused. "I believe you've taken a wrong turn. Senior Tai Chi is in the small studio next door." Snickers spread through the class like a ripple in water. Unfazed, Edith responded, "I'm here for Jiu Jitsu," her voice calm and firm. "I've just moved to the area and am looking for a new place to train." Jackson exchanged amused glances with his assistants. "Train? At your age?" His disbelief was almost theatrical. "No offense, but this is a full-contact sport. We train for serious competition." "I know exactly what jiu-jitsu demands," Edith said evenly. "I've been practicing since 1980. A ripple of laughter ran through the room, low and mocking. Coach Jackson's smile turned razor-sharp with condescension. "Look, Grandma," he said, dragging out the word for maximum insult, drawing even more chuckles. "I admire the spirit, but this place isn't built for beginners, especially not ones who might hurt themselves just trying to stand up." Edith didn't flinch. Her eyes, steady and unwavering, remained locked on his. "I appreciate your concern," she replied, voice calm. "But I assure you, I can manage." "Can you even get off the ground without help?" One of the blue belts jeered, prompting another round of cruel laughter. Coach Jackson raised a hand, silencing them, though the smirk tugging at his lips betrayed his own amusement. "What belt do you say you are?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. He leaned hard on the word say. "I don't say," Edith said quietly, unmoved by his tone. "I earned a second-degree black belt under Master Hiroshi Takahashi. Back in 1995, the name meant little to most in the room, but not to Jackson. For just a second, something flickered in his expression. Recognition, maybe even respect. Takahashi was an icon in jiu-jitsu circles, the kind of quiet legend whose name wasn't shouted but carried weight among the truly dedicated. Still, Jackson recovered quickly. The smirk returned. "Well, I'm sure the standards were different back then," he said, with a theatrical wave toward the exit. "Why don't you sit in the visitors area, ma'am? See what a modern class looks like? Might help you decide if this is still your thing." It was a polite dismissal, draped in professionalism, but soaked in mockery. Some of the students openly grinned, entertained by the unfolding spectacle. But Edith Simmons wasn't a woman who spent 40 years on the mat just to be waved off like an interruption. "I didn't come to watch," she said evenly, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "I came to train." The air changed. Students glanced at each other, amusement slowly giving way to intrigue. Jackson blinked. He hadn't expected defiance, not from her. "Ma'am," he said, shifting into the tone of someone explaining algebra to a toddler, "we have safety policies. I can't allow someone of your condition to join an advanced session without an evaluation." Edith nodded. "That's fair," she said. "So evaluate me." Laughter broke out again, some uncertain, some genuinely entertained. Jackson crossed his arms, basking in the attention. "You want me to test you?" he said, eyebrows raised. "Right now?" "That's why I came." Jackson shrugged theatrically. "All right then, change of plans, everyone," he announced. "Today's warm-up includes a special assessment." He turned to a nearby student, a blue belt brimming with youthful cockiness. "Mike, come here. Help me demonstrate a few things." Mike stepped forward, clearly delighted. "This is Mike Peterson," Jackson told Edith, his grin unwavering. "One of our intermediate guys. Let's see if you can manage a basic drill with him." Edith met Jackson's eyes without hesitation. "I'd rather spar with you, Coach Jackson." The room fell into stunned silence. Someone in the back let out a low, "Ooh," before quickly falling quiet again. Jackson's posture stiffened. The smirk vanished. "Me?" he asked, his voice suddenly flatter. "You want to spar with me?" "You're the one assessing me, aren't you?" she said, voice as calm as ever. "It only makes sense." And just like that, the dynamic flipped. Jackson was trapped, refuse, and he'd look weak. Except, and he'd have to grapple with a woman who could be his grandmother. A beat passed. Then Jackson's pride kicked in. This was his dojo, his rules. He'd show everyone how to deal with this situation. Gracefully. Fine, he said, regaining his swagger. 3 minutes, light roll, no submissions, just movement and positioning. He looked at his students. Everyone, clear the center mat. As they formed a circle, Coach Jackson removed his instructor patch and laid it carefully aside, making a show of preparation. Edith stepped onto the mat quietly, her pace unhurried, but her every move radiated control and history. I'll keep it easy, Jackson announced loudly, a half smile playing on his lips. Just some gentle positioning work. He faced her, dropping into his stance. Ready, Mrs. Simmons? Edith nodded. It's just Edith. And yes, coach, I'm ready. Begin, he said. The room hushed. Jackson circled her slowly, every movement exaggerated, telegraphing restraint. In Jiu Jitsu, he explained to the crowd, it's all about leverage, not strength, which is why it works for. His hand reached for her sleeve. In a flash, everything changed. Before his fingers could tighten, Edith pivoted subtly. Her grip locked on his wrist. A half-second later, she disrupted his balance with a flawless sleeve drag. Jackson stumbled forward, instinctively adjusting. Big mistake. With graceful precision, Edith dropped into seated guard. Her legs snaked between his, hooking his ankle as her hand moved to his collar. A swift hip turn followed. Smooth, efficient. And then gravity did the rest. Jackson was pulled off balance. His knees hit the mat, and by the time he blinked, she had transitioned to a clean, technical mount. The kind of transition most fighters half her age would struggle to execute. The room was stunned into silence. A 72-year-old woman had just floored their head coach, and no one had seen it coming. A collective gasp swept across the room. Jackson's composure cracked. What the? He started, scrambling to regain control of the situation. But Edith wasn't finished. Her movements remained fluid, deliberate, each one executed with the precision of someone who had repeated them thousands of times. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, securing grips that were virtually impossible to break without textbook counters. Jackson, still reeling, made a critical mistake, a beginner's mistake. He pushed against her directly, exactly what a seasoned practitioner would anticipate. Without hesitation, Edith redirected his energy, using his momentum to her advantage. The opening she created was textbook, a seamless transition into a classic armbar. Jackson realized the danger. Too late. He tried to stack and pass, but found himself caught. The trap had already sprung. In a blur, his arm was extended, trapped tightly under Edith's control. The pressure built steadily, inescapably, until he had no choice. Tap! Jackson gasped, slapping the mat with his free hand. The room fell dead silent. The entire exchange had taken less than 10 seconds. Stunned, the students stood frozen, mouths agape. Their tough, intimidating head coach had just been submitted by a 72-year-old woman. And not with luck or trickery, with flawless, textbook technique, clean enough to belong in a professional instructional video. Edith released the hold immediately and rose to her feet with the ease of someone decades younger. She straightened her kimono and bowed respectfully to Jackson, who still knelt on the mat, visibly rattled. Thank you for the assessment, Coach Jackson, she said evenly. I hope that addresses your concerns about my abilities. No one dared speak. The impossible had happened, and they'd all seen it. Jackson slowly got to his feet, face flushed with embarrassment and disbelief. The weight of what had just occurred hung heavy in the air. Who are you? He finally asked. His voice was quiet now. No bravado. No mockery. Edith adjusted her belt with calm dignity. I told you. Edith Simmons. Second-degree black belt under Master Takahashi recognition flickered across one of the older students' faces. He stepped forward slowly, eyes widening. Wait, Takahashi? As in the Takahashi, the one who trained the national champions in the 90s? Edith offered a modest nod. You're that Edith Simmons, the man continued, voice rising in awe. You were his top female competitor? I read about you in old martial arts magazines. You won the Eastern Regional Championships. 3 times, right? A murmur spread through the group. Jackson's expression shifted again, from humiliation to realization. That was a long time ago, Edith said quietly. I never sought the spotlight. I just loved the practice. Jackson swallowed hard, then bowed deeply. Mrs. Simmons, he said, genuine humility in his voice now. I owe you an apology. I was disrespectful, and I acted like a fool. Edith nodded graciously. We all make judgments based on appearances, Coach. What matters is whether we're willing to revise them when we learn better. A young woman in a purple belt stepped forward tentatively. Ma'am, that armbar? It was beautiful. Would you be willing to show us that again? Edith looked to Jackson, raising an eyebrow in silent question. He hesitated only a second, then nodded. I think we could all learn something today, he said, his voice filled with something it lacked before, respect. If Mrs. Simmons is willing. For the next hour, the class transformed. What had begun as a routine session turned into a masterclass. Edith's techniques weren't flashy, but they were clean, impeccable, sharpened by 4 decades of practice. Her timing, her balance, her understanding of leverage, each movement carried the weight of experience. But what truly captivated the students was her teaching. The way she explained the why behind each move, the subtle angles, the hidden mechanics, the patience required to feel the rhythm of a transition instead of forcing it. Jackson, his ego now out of the way, joined in. He asked thoughtful questions, helped demonstrate positions, and openly praised her insights. As the session progressed, admiration replaced mockery. The energy in the room had shifted. What had entered the dojo that day wasn't just a woman with surprising skill. It was something rarer, deeper, wisdom. In my 44 years of practice, Edith said as she guided a student through a complicated guard pass, I've learned that Jiu Jitsu isn't about strength or speed. Those fade. It's about principles, timing, leverage, balance, and above all, respect for your opponent and for yourself. Her words landed heavily. The students were riveted. And when the class finally ended, the line to speak with Edith was long. Students who had once laughed now came forward with reverence, asking questions, seeking advice, expressing thanks. Jackson stood off to the side, watching, thinking. Finally, when the last student had finished, he approached her again, his demeanor sincere. Mrs. Simmons, he began, I'd like to offer you a position here at Elite. Edith raised an eyebrow, surprised. We have women's classes, youth programs. We could benefit tremendously from your knowledge, he continued. Your experience is invaluable. Edith offered a gentle smile. I didn't come looking for a job, Coach Jackson, she replied. I just wanted a place to continue my practice. Jackson nodded thoughtfully. Of course, you'd have full access to our facilities whenever you want, but I hope you'll consider sharing your knowledge too. Teaching even just 1 class a week would mean a lot to our students. Edith paused, weighing the unexpected offer. When she'd walked in that morning, her only plan was to find a place to keep practicing, stay active, and maybe build a new community in this town she was starting fresh in. I'll think about it, she said at last. But I have one condition if I'm going to train here regularly. Name it, Jackson replied without hesitation. The dojo has to be a place of respect for everyone who walks through that door, no matter their age, gender, or appearance. Her gaze held his steady. What happened today shouldn't ever happen to anyone learning here. Jackson met her eyes and nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke with surprising grace. That's a principle I should have upheld all along. Consider it a promise. As Edith gathered her things, several students bowed to her, a rare sign of respect usually reserved only for the head instructor. See you Thursday, Sensei Simmons, the young woman with the purple belt asked hopefully. Edith smiled softly. Thursday sounds good. Walking toward the exit, Edith noticed a small group of older adults peering through the reception windows, their whispers filled with curiosity. The receptionist approached her sheepishly. Ma'am, there are several people asking if we offer classes for mature students. They want to know if you'll be teaching. Edith's smile deepened. Perhaps this new chapter would be more meaningful than she'd imagined. Tell them to come back Thursday, she said. We'll see what we can do. 3 months later, the Elite Martial Arts Academy had transformed remarkably. What had once been a space mostly for young competitors now blossomed into a diverse and welcoming community. Twice a week, Edith led the Foundations class, open to all ages and skill levels. The focus wasn't on speed or competition, but on the timeless technical principles she'd refined over decades. Surprisingly, these classes quickly became the most popular in the academy. Younger students found that drilling fundamentals under Edith's watchful eye dramatically improved their performance. Older practitioners appreciated her patient, methodical approach that allowed them to progress safely and confidently. Coach Jackson himself was a regular in Edith's classes, often serving as her demonstration partner. His initial embarrassment faded into genuine respect, hungry to learn from her deep technical mastery. Mrs. Simmons has forgotten more about pressure and leverage than most of us will ever know, he once told a local journalist covering their unusual teaching partnership. On a busy tournament day at the academy, Edith and Jackson co-judged matches across all age and belt divisions. Between bouts, Edith demonstrated key techniques with Jackson's help, breaking down the subtle principles the crowd should watch for. Notice how leverage, not strength, creates the submission opportunity, she explained, carefully applying a technical armbar on Jackson. This is accessible to anyone, regardless of size or age, if executed correctly. In the viewing area, a group of elderly newcomers watched intently. They were part of the growing silver belts, seniors inspired by Edith's classes who had joined the academy. "She's changed everything," one of Elite's longtime instructors remarked to a visitor. "Not just for older students, but for all of us. She reminded us what truly matters in Jiu Jitsu." From the center of the mat, Edith noticed a new visitor enter, an elderly man with a cane, hesitant but determined. She smiled, recognizing the same uncertainty she had felt 3 months before. Coach Jackson caught her gaze and quietly walked over to greet the man, guiding him respectfully to a seat. Some lessons, Edith reflected, extend far beyond the techniques on the mat. If this story moved you, remember, appearances can be deceiving, and true wisdom comes in many forms. Have you ever been underestimated or witnessed someone judged unfairly? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories that encourage us to look beyond the surface. Tell us where you're watching from and which part of Edith's journey resonated with you the most. Until next time, remember, respect is earned, not demanded, and true mastery is shown through actions, not words. The oldest tree in the forest often has the deepest roots,